You are live. Welcome to the show. It is Sunday, August 9th, 2026. You only get one of these, so do something with it. I was playing around with my background. I'm always trying to make incremental improvements for the show, right? I want you to enjoy it when you watch it. But you know what? I was getting hung up on it, and I was like, the show must go on. So I got to start it. Now, yesterday, had a little moment. Sometimes I come in here gung-ho, and I gotta squeeze my pillow. I gotta punch it a little. Today is one of those days with some of the topics. I try to bring you the juicy stuff. Juicy fruit? You remember juicy fruit? Little piece of shit gum. Who remembers the juicy fruit? And then we'll get into a new segment I'm gonna introduce. Who remembers a little juicy fruit, little piece of shit? You remember this? This is the new one. Just so everybody knows, this is new juicy fruit. If you know the old one, where's the old juicy fruit? Look at this shit. This ain't juicy fruit. This is different. Where's the old school juicy fruit? Where is it? There you go. This little piece of shit right here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, this little piece of shit. Where's the 25 cent mark? This little piece of shit is what I'm talking. Oh, shoot. Look at that. Look at this, y'all. Oh, man. Reddit is the best. Look at this. Oh, yeah. Damn. 1905. Wrigley's Juicy Fruit. 1924. Nice logos. Who still eats Juicy Fruit? See, this is the one I'm talking about. 1989. Then they changed it in 2002. Piece of shit. Everybody loves Juicy Fruit, but the flavor goes right away. And once the flavor goes, what do? I just spit on my camera and my laptop. You spit it out on the street, right? I used to justify spitting my gum out on the street because I thought it laid better traction for cars and bikes as they would roll over it. Tires. That's how stupid I was. Actually, I kind of still think maybe it does. I don't know. Does it make it more slippery? I don't know, but I thought I was contributing to the environment. Juicy fruit, yummy. Last 10 seconds. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start off with a daily devotional, and I'm going to read it to you. If it started, finish it. Firmness in decisions is a mark of those who trust in God. Jesus taught that whoever puts his hand on the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. Luke 9:62. Starting is important, but staying until the end is what reveals a committed heart. Many start excited, but give up halfway due to difficulties and distractions. I do it all the time with the show, but you gotta stay the course. Whatever you put consistency behind, determination, and focus, it will come to fruition, and especially if you pray for it. And I'm being objective here. This ain't no subjectivity. And of course, you have to believe in God, I guess, to believe that. But I believe this with all of my heart. Everything I have ever asked for God or from God, everything I ever pray for, anything. And yeah, it could be money, it could be success, it could be a job, it could be whatever it is. It's part of it is manifest destiny. But in my opinion, it's all God. And I give him all the glory and thanks for it. Let's continue on. Maybe you started something that God told you to do, and in the face of obstacles, thought about stopping. Don't let tiredness or fear steal from you what the Lord has already prepared. True victory belongs to those who do not give up. If it started, finish it. Persevere with faith, because those who remain firm will see the promise fulfilled. So now, a question. In which area is God calling you to stand firm until the end? Whoever decides with faith needs to remain firm until they see the promise. And that's today's daily devotional. It certainly motivated me. I love it. And that's what we're going to move forward with. My girlfriend sends me one every morning, and I thank her for it. All right, let's get into the first topic. And this one's let's get into it, y'all, because listen, we got a lot to say about this, okay? We got a lot to say about this. The Save America Act. What do you want? What graphic do you want me to put up? Pass the Save Act. Yeah, pass the Save Act. Save America Act. They're defrauding our voting system. You want this one over here? Stop the Save America Act. Stop it. Protect voting rights and defend Latino civic participation. Hey, stop the Save Act. Everybody over here, fight for take it away. Whatever. Who doesn't like a good protest? You know, I don't really, I've been to a few protests, but who doesn't like watching a protest better, right? You want to see the fight. You don't want to be in the fight. Oh, yeah. You want to see two people going at it. Yeah, fuck Trump. Trump's the best. Fuck Biden. Biden's best. Democrat, Republican. Who doesn't love a good old boxing match? Yeah, some Puglianos. Yeah. All right. Pass the Save Act. Don't pass the Save Act. Let's get into it. Y'all, I'm going to tell you right now. Most of the shit out there is frivolous. It's cheap. Yeah? Most of the shit out there, you don't have to care about. Yeah? It's like, whatever. How bad is Trump, really? Now, some people are going to be like, he's the worst. He's ruining America, blah, blah, blah. Some people are going to say, oh, Biden was the worst, right? Sleepy Joe Biden, the worst. We didn't know what we were doing. America's back, baby. Whatever. Most of this shit is trivial. Now, we need to take care of it. We need to pay attention to it because ultimately the checks and balances are not only our representative democracy in the form of the Senate and the House and everybody else that represents you in your city and state, but it's also our public opinion. That's the real check, in my opinion, because who ultimately holds the power? Now, technically, who holds the power? Depends on how technical you want to get, I guess, but you could say whoever has the military, whoever has the guns, the money, right? Which would be the government, any government around the world. For that sake. However, on the flip side, technically, if the United States were to unite, if collectively 50 million people got on their feet and said, hey, we're not working anymore, or hey, we're not purchasing from this company anymore, or hey, we're going to storm the Capitol, whatever it was, guess what? Who do you think would win? Ultimately, we would. There is nothing that a government can do against a collective group of people. You just couldn't stop them. We are the immovable force. However, we tend to remain docile because of the fear that they stoke into the public. Now, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but should Americans be required to prove their citizenship when registering to vote? That right there seems like an innocuous question, in my opinion. Hey, should Americans be required to prove their citizenship when registering to vote? If I just woke up from a long sleep, I'm talking about 6 years or something, and you ask me that question, I'd be like, what day is it? And then I'd be like, yeah, duh. You got to be a citizen of the country to vote, right? That's written in our law, right? It is. However, we're debating over what it's going to take to prove that you're a citizen to vote. Now, the Senate has just left Washington without passing the Save America Act, despite President Trump demanding that senators remain until it was approved. The bill would create two separate requirements: documentary proof of citizenship when registering for federal elections, and photo identification when casting a ballot. Again, so far seems innocuous. But the distinction is important because identification and citizenship are not the same thing. A normal driver's license establishes your identity, but it does not necessarily establish American citizenship because many states, like New York, will let you have a driver's license even though you're not a citizen. Now, that may be a problem in and of itself, depending on which side of the argument you're on, but states can issue driver's license to permanent residents, visa holders, and in some states, undocumented immigrants. Now, under this proposal, a citizen registering to vote would generally need an unexpired American passport or a government-issued photo ID combined with a certified birth certificate, naturalization certificate, citizenship certificate, or another accepted citizenship record. And yes, if you're asking, hey, could this interfere with online and mail registration? It would. Now, here's the problem with that. I agree. We should make sure that if our laws say, and they do, that only a citizen can vote, then we need to make sure that only citizens vote. But here it is, and I'm going to read this out because I did a lot of research on this, and it's all available. It's nothing complicated. Across most of America, election officials verify your identity, but they do not independently prove your citizenship before registering you. Citizenship is generally based on a sworn statement. A person can potentially lie, and the system relies on criminal penalties and later detection to catch that lie. So what does that mean? That means in a place like New York or many other states, I can register online and I can say, yeah, I'm a citizen. And here is my information. And I can lie about it. But I swear, I attest under perjury that I am a citizen. Now, let's say I go to vote and I show my ID and I get away with voting. They could only ever know that I voted deviously, if you will. They could only ever know that I wasn't a citizen after the fact, after I voted. So, in one sense, you gotta close the loophole, right? If you want to protect the integrity of United States elections, you do have to close the loophole. But here's what President Trump and the Republican Party are proposing. And I don't necessarily agree with this because you got to understand how stiff this becomes. Under this proposal, you would have to provide an unexpired American passport, which about 50% of America has, only 50%. So you're already leaving out 50%. Or a government issued photo ID combined with a certified birth certificate, naturalization certificate, citizenship certificate. Who has these things? I'll tell you right now, I think my mother has my birth certificate. Who readily has their birth certificate? And even if I didn't have my birth certificate, I would probably have to contact the hospital in which I was born in and get a certified copy, because you cannot just make a photocopy of it. That would not be accepted under these rules. So yes, you are going to marginalize an entire group of people. There's going to be a lot of people that can't vote. If you look at our elections already, we got about 60% participation in presidential elections. We got about 50% in the off cycles, meaning the midterms, any other elections that are not presidential elections. We get about 40 to 50% participation. Do you now want to disenfranchise voters even more? Now, the legislation does not clearly explain how documentary proof would be submitted during online registration. Anyone registering by mail would generally have to present the citizenship document in person before being fully registered for a federal election. That eliminates much of the convenience of registering remotely. It kind of makes it impossible. Now, I'm not disagreeing. There's a loophole here. Because if anyone can just register and then say, after the fact, you have to have people working in the elections, right, actually verify whether that person should have voted or not, it's kind of too late, isn't it? Because now we're talking about reversing elections. We're talking about recounts. It's way too messy. There is a loophole here. I agree. There is a loophole here. But do I want everybody to have their birth certificate presented? It's overkill. To vote, it's overkill. Because now you're not expediting the process. You're essentially increasing the obstacles. You're increasing bureaucracy to say, hey, I don't want people to vote. I want people that are energized to vote. And I can't agree with that. I don't know what the alternative is, but I can't agree with this so far. Then there is a separate requirement to show photo identification while voting. Many people assume every American already does this, but voter identification laws vary by state. As of August 2026, 36 states require or request some form of identification at the polls. Other states rely on signatures or different verification systems. Now in New York, I know that as I go into the voting booth, they check my ID before giving me the form. But in many places in New York, apparently the research shows online that most registered voters do not have to show ID every time they vote. You verify your identity when registering. First-time voters may be asked for identification if their information was not verified beforehand, but established voters normally sign in without presenting a photo ID. So if you did so before, maybe you have a little edge. It's a little bit more expedited, as it probably should be. However, I mean, it's already a little tedious to vote. Is it difficult? No. I think voting is extremely accommodative and accessible. But now, for anyone looking to register to vote, you got to get a birth certificate? I mean, what are we doing with this birth certificate? Can I take a picture of my birth certificate and upload it? I mean, it's like, do we want participation in this country or not? So this bill would substantially change the process in New York and several other states. Doesn't matter what side you're on here. It's what's fair and what gives us the most efficient route possible, the most efficient way possible to cast a ballot. Unless the hidden agenda here by the Republicans, and I don't want to plant a seed necessarily, but is the agenda here to make people not vote? Because that's pretty diabolical, right? That's not good. I want people to vote. If the overwhelming majority of America wants a certain candidate, let them have it. I'm right down the middle. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I don't give a shit. I want to see it all play out. And I have my criticisms, of course. Now let's take a look at what President Trump has to say.
He's been pretty pointed on this, Doom. He says he doesn't see a pathway to 50, 51, doesn't have 60 Democrats are voting for it. What's the disconnect between you and Doom?
Well, we have no disconnect. I think we have a good relationship, but I view that as a very important thing. It's a voter ID. If you just even take the ballots out of it, the ballots are very important, but we do that another time. Voter ID, and it's proof of citizenship. And I think you can't get any more basic than that. In other words, we want to see your citizenship. We want to make sure that you're a citizen to vote. We like photo ID just to make sure, because the elections are rigged in this country. The elections are a mess in this country. And that was proven in 2020. And it's been proven elsewhere. Look at the recent election that took place with the Spencer Pratt in Los Angeles. All of a sudden, I mean, they came from nowhere. It looked like he was in the runoff or easily in the runoff. The other one was, the third place was a woman nobody ever heard of. She's crying. Oh, I didn't make it. She didn't make it by a lot. All of a sudden, she surged. Unknown people don't surge. And she surged after the election was over. And she ended up getting in the runoff. He didn't. Look, we're like a third world country in many cases, in many states, third world country. So I think that, I think it's very important. Save America Act is a very important thing. John's trying. He's trying hard. I really believe that. But if he doesn't get there, it would be unfortunate.
He says, why don't you get the votes for it?
See, and I'm not against Trump here, right? Like, I agree that we should protect our elections. However, there's been no proof of widespread voter fraud. Not a single president has come out and shown evidence. Trump says it all the time. Our elections are rigged. There's been no evidence. I've done research. There's been plenty of scholars that have done research. Plenty of people have done the research. There has been no research for widespread voter fraud. Now, maybe the information is being withheld. Maybe the information is being manipulated. But we don't have access to any information that says otherwise. So we have to accept the results, right? I mean, seriously, right? How far are you going to take being a cynic? It's not even healthy. You got to accept the results, right? I mean, at some point, no matter what you believe, even if you're conspiratorial here, You got to accept the results for what they are. A, you got to keep your life moving. And B, that's what consensus is. I wish we could have like a vote cast maybe from all of our politicians into the blockchain that's, I don't know, anonymous or something, because that's how Bitcoin works, right? The registering of the transaction. And that's how you promote veracity in the blockchain for who possesses what, right? So I kind of wish everybody could somehow vote and we could somehow rationalize, somehow what the vote counts were, or is there widespread voter fraud? We need to hear from our politicians here. And it just hasn't come out. So I can't agree with President Trump. At least on this, I can't agree with him. Right? We go topic by topic with our president. We go topic by topic with these governments. In this case, there's been no confirmed voter fraud in the United States. But I agree with the basic principle. Non-citizens should not vote in federal elections. That's already illegal, but it should also be meaningfully verified. I mean, but then again, do you think that immigrants would go out of their way to vote in an election, in something as frivolous as an election? No offense to US elections or any other election. You think they would actually compromise themselves? I mean, right now you got ICE running around. You think people are actually going to say, hey, yeah, I want to get Trump out of office, or I really want this candidate in the Senate. So, yeah, I'm going to go cast a ballot. I'm going to go attest under perjury that I'm a US citizen and I'm going to vote. That's just highly unlikely. I'm not saying we still don't need safeguards. But again, there's just been no proof, no evidence of widespread voter fraud. So we got to keep it moving, right? World's going to keep on churning. We got to keep it moving. We can't get hung up on this. When someone gives us substantial proof, we will stop, we will review that information, that evidence, and we'll move forward with the argument. Right now, our elections are not rigged. They are safe, they are authentic, and they're met with integrity. That's it. But I agree. The government should not merely ask someone to check a citizenship box and conduct no validation whatsoever. The problem is the validation happens afterwards. It happens after the votes are cast. And that's not good. It can happen between the time they register and the time they cast the ballot, but who's doing so? Do we even have the resources checking? The evidence, the research says no. But how large is the existing problem? Utah examined more than 2 million voter registrations and identified 27 confirmed non-citizen registrations. Another federal verification system returned approximately 0.04 of examined records as non-citizens. What are we talking about? President Trump, you're creating a problem, you're creating a narrative, and guess what? So many people believe you because they love you. Whoever's in your corner, you know they're going to listen to you. You say that there's widespread voter fraud, they're going to believe you. But there isn't. Utah is Republican. They don't want to lie. They're not trying to just hurt the Republican Party. There has to be integrity, not only in our voting system, but with our politicians, no? You can't just lie to get your way. Meanwhile, the Bipartisan Policy Center estimates that roughly 12% of registered voters may lack the specific documentation required by this legislation. A married woman whose last name no longer matches her birth certificate might need a driver's license. She might need a birth certificate and a marriage certificate just to establish the connection. Again, this is disenfranchisement. This will prevent far more eligible citizens from registering than ineligible non-citizens. And if you kind of look at the pattern here that's emerging, it's like Republicans kind of don't want people to vote. And then on the other hand, if you want to get a little conspiratorial, but the Democrats are so pro-immigrant, they know that bringing in those immigrants, they're probably going to be Democrat as they have children and future generations sit here. So it's like they're kind of protecting the Democratic Party. It's a little conspiratorial, but not really. You could find some evidence there. So we support voter identification. But why not permit a driver's license for identity and require the government to verify citizenship electronically through passport, social security, naturalization, and immigration databases? There are other ways. The government already possesses this information. They know who's a citizen. They grant citizenship. It's 2026, right? If I walk in with my New York State driver's license, but I'm a non-citizen, and I go to vote, I'm registered already, right? And I go to vote, they could either stop me there, or let's say I registered, they should match that up against the database, our citizenship database, right? Who's a citizen? I don't have to even be living in this country for you to know who's a citizen and who's not, who's alive and who's dead. You should quickly be able to make that match and say, yes, this person can vote, or no, this person cannot vote. Let's say I registered, I don't know, just a couple weeks before an election. You should still have ample time to know who's a citizen versus who isn't. At the very least, you have another safeguard at the polls where you could say, hey, your registration just didn't come through as valid, or it's still pending, so we can't let you vote. There are many ways to do this. So I just can't agree with this. Let's hear some more from President Trump.
I would say more than half of your states have serious election problems. That's why we want to have voter ID. That's why we want to have, let's say, I think citizenship is very important. You have to prove your citizenship. In order to vote, you have to you have to show citizenship. I also think mail-in ballots, the concept of mail-in ballots, it's immediately corrupt. Jimmy Carter, the best thing he ever did. I didn't think he was a very good president, but he had a commission, and his commission came out to the conclusion you cannot have mail-in ballots. People will cheat, and we have to get rid of mail-in ballots. I would say more than half of your states have serious election problems. That's why we want to have vote.
We don't have widespread voter fraud. So I'm going to say that every single time. Now, we had 66 million mail-in ballots in 2020. I mean, that is a ton of people, right? You can't take away mail-in ballots. And why would that be fraud? Why do you think that that's fraud? You can't just state the case. You can't just state the fact without backing it up with evidence. And Trump is just notorious for that. Again, the government already possesses this information. So if Trump really wanted to do something about this, I don't think that he would create more obstacles for Americans to vote. If you really want voter participation because you want to win the right way and you really want the voice of the people to translate to who represents us in our democracy, then why place the entire burden on the voter? We already have systems that know who's a citizen and who's not. If I register, match it up in the database, say yay or nay. It's really that simple. So I really can't agree with this. So you know what? We're going to go back to this graphic right here. Stop the Save America Act. It shouldn't be this way because you're asking people to, you're asking people to pull their birth certificates. Y'all, my birth certificate is from 1989. That shit is flimsy and delicate. Nobody wants to take, I assume nobody wants to take their birth certificate, their real birth certificate. It's just too vital a record, right? No one wants to take their birth certificate out of their house. And if you're saying I can't make a photocopy, I got to go get a certified copy. For what? People already don't give a shit about voting. All signs lead to, hey, the Republicans want less participation. Where in presidential elections, we only have 60 to 65% of participation. I can't agree with this. And I've thought about it. We can require verification without requiring every American to locate an original birth certificate or maintain an unexpired passport. If the objective is election integrity, which it should be, verify citizenship accurately. If the practical effect is preventing millions of citizens from registering because they do not possess the correct paperwork, that is not election security. That is a defective system brought upon us by the Republican Party, by President Trump. They should not pass this bill. This bill is super important. And let's just settle it here. Let's put the cherry on top. I don't even care if you care about our elections. You should still care about this. Because even if you don't want to participate, this is already creating a conundrum for American voters. It's not fair for us to be able to vote. If we have some type of identification, they should be able to use any type of verification that we have. They should be able to check. They should be able to check the veracity of it, the authenticity of it, and then match it against a database to say, yes, you are allowed to vote. That's it. Don't tell me that the government does not have these resources. They do. It's already proven. They know who's a citizen, and we have identification. They're just asking for birth certificates or passports, which only 50% of the United States has. What is the Republican Party really thinking about here? I think they want lower participation because it puts the odds in their favor. All right, next topic. Oh shit, Todd Blanche. Oh shit. Oh. Mr. Todd. Why do you want to be Attorney General? Because you want to make that money, boy. You just want a position of power because you want to make that money. You got one life to live, right? You just want to make that money. Well, here's the question. Should the president's former personal attorney be permitted to become Attorney General of the United States? Pen drop. Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm going to put my personal attorney, he's done such a good job for me over here. I'm going to just make him Attorney General so he can prosecute on my behalf. Just, with government resources and unlimited funding. Come on now. You know who Todd Blanche is? That's Donald Trump's pit bull. That's his canine. Yeah, sick him. Yeah, go get him. That's how I look at the Attorney General. That's what Pam Bondi was doing. Sick him. Go get him. Yeah, go after her. Go after him. That's my enemy. What did I tell you, Pam? She was screwing me in New York for 10 years. Letitia James, go after her. I'm going to teach her a lesson. And what do you think Todd Blanche is going to do? I mean, that's all it is, right? Now, Todd Blanche has been confirmed as Attorney General by a vote of 50 to 49. That's how close it was. Every Democrat opposed him. Republicans Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski also voted against him before deciding whether this appointment is defensible. Now, before deciding whether this appointment is defensible, who exactly is Todd Blanche? Blanche spent nearly a decade as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. He handled narcotics and violent crime cases, became co-chief of the Violent Crimes Unit, and later supervised the White Plains Division. After leaving government, he became a private defense attorney, where you make a lot of money. He represented Paul Manafort, Trump associate Boris Epstein, and Igor Fruman, who was connected to Rudy Giuliani. Trump hired Blanche in April 2023. Blanche represented him in 3 criminal cases: the New York hush money prosecution, the federal classified documents case, and the federal election obstruction case. Blanche led Trump's defense during the 2024 New York trial. He also cross-examined Michael Cohen, challenged Stormy Daniels' account, and argued that Trump was being politically prosecuted. The jury nevertheless convicted The jury nevertheless convicted Trump on all 34 felony accounts. On all 34 felony counts. Months later, Trump selected Blanche to become Deputy Attorney General. The Senate confirmed him in March 2025 when Trump removed Pam Bondi in April 2026. Blanche became acting Attorney General. So that's your profile. And this isn't someone who represented Trump 15 years ago and then followed an unrelated career. Blanche was Trump's lead criminal defense attorney in 2024 and entered Trump's Justice Department in 2025. What is Trump doing? He's building a team. You like sports? You like football, baseball, basketball? What you like? Well, that's what Trump is doing. You see one head coach move from one team to another, he's going to bring his assistant coaches. He's going to bring in who he trusts. Now, this is a little from Todd Blanche.
Screw up to the botched release that even Pam Bondi pointed at Blanche as responsible for. And it gives the blessing to his continuing role in the cover-up of Epstein files. So there's Epstein for you. And let me ask the letter from the Epstein victims, to Senators Tillis and Cornyn, to be put into the record. So next we get to this crooked slush fund Trump family tax amnesty scam. Let's take a look at that. We've got these two new pieces of paper, one signed only by Todd Blanche, one not signed by anybody, neither of which has any legal effect whatsoever. They are decorative. So what problems do they leave behind? Well, one is, can you trust Todd Blanche going forward? I will tell you, I do not. I think it would be unreasonable to trust him going forward. There is enough weasel room in these documents to drive a truck through. And what might that truck look like? Well, you could get rid of the anti-weaponization fund for $1.776 billion, and in a month, put out the Trump Justice Fund for $1.9 billion. Nothing in this document prevents anything like that from happening. You could open a drive-up window at the Department of Justice for copiers from January 6th to come through and get friendly Federal Tort Claims Act settlements from the Department of Justice.
And what he's talking about is that $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund. And by the way, that whole settlement is just crazy because Trump is barred from being audited by the IRS for all of his past audits. And on top of that, they were going to use $1.8 billion of our taxpayer money to provide to the January 6th defendants for tort claims. Claims that they were either defamed or they were wrongfully convicted, whatever it was. How much they could get, each person, who knows? But that's what they were asking Todd Blanche to do away with. And of course, there's another process in which they can still acquire money from the US government for any one of those reasons. And that's why many senators, including many Democrats, were saying, you have given us no reason to believe that you're not going to revive this slush fund so that they can potentially get paid out. And why would we want, again, y'all, like, why would we want January 6th defendants? Like, why would we want people that stormed Capitol Hill to get money back? People were killed, property was damaged, people were assaulted. I mean, seriously, all things considered, why would you want people? How? Maybe there's a couple of people in there. I don't know all the facts. None of us do. But we're going to just reserve $1.8 billion of U.S. taxpayer money? Does that make sense to anyone? And why does Trump feel like he owes anyone? By the way, the only reason why Todd Blanche was confirmed is because he said, and Trump corroborated, that they would do away with the slush fund. But what Senator Whitehouse is saying is this was a decorative deal. These signatures mean nothing. They're on papers that are worthless. And essentially, they could just revive it with a new bill.
We're already handing out settlements to Trump's allies. What's to prevent the drive-up window? Come on in. Here we are. We got the friendly form for you to file, and here's a check. Nothing prevents the cop beaters from being funded by the Trump Department of Justice. But let's assume that we really have made a big improvement here. Let's assume that the burglar has been forced to give back some of the jewelry he stole. Being forced to give back some ill-gotten gains doesn't mean you're not still a burglar. There's a question of the man's character, that he was willing to get into these schemes in the first place, into what George Will called the sludge of self-dealing of this administration. Even if there isn't Slush Fund 2.0, and even if there isn't the drive-up window for cop beaters, there's a real problem with an individual who would agree to that in the first place.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. President Trump is totally out of bounds for this, and so is Todd Blanche for supporting it. And of course, he botched the whole Epstein files, right? Because they said that they were going to release all the documents. They didn't. They redacted a bunch. They released it in phases. There are still a ton of files that have not been released. And then, oh, by the way, some of them actually compromised some politicians, including President Trump, right? There's some information out there that I don't think Trump wanted to get out there to begin with. So, I mean, no matter where you stand on Todd Blanche, at the end of the day, he's Trump's former personal attorney. He's going to make out like a Band-Aid with this, because the moment he leaves office, remember, it's something I always say. I don't know why you think you have to be corrupt while you're in office. You should be altruistic. You should do right by the people. Our lives are at stake. That's why you're in that position. Once you leave government, you're going to make a ton of money. So why on earth do you have to be that selfish? It says a lot about your character. If you're willing to be a greedy, nasty, self-promoting thief in office, if you're willing to be corrupt in office, I mean, that just says so much about your character. Because the moment Todd Blanche leaves, he's going to be picked up by any law firm because of his connections. He's probably going to sit on the board of directors of a few different corporations, should he choose to, and he's going to make millions of dollars. So for some reason, you feel this was right to do. No, you only did it because essentially you're Trump's puppet. And you got no spine to tell Trump, no, either that or you actually agreed with it, which is crazy. Again, how on earth could you agree to compensate January 6th defendants? That's just beyond me. Like, that makes zero sense to me. But that's who we have as Attorney General. Now, what does the Attorney General control? This is America's chief federal law enforcement officer. He supervises the Justice Department, the FBI, federal prosecutors, civil rights enforcement, national security investigations, and the government's positions in federal court. He establishes prosecutorial priorities. He approves investigations. He influences whether charges are pursued and advises the president on legal questions. That authority itself makes Blanche's recent conduct extremely important. Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS over the disclosure of his tax records. Blanche later approved a settlement containing two extraordinary elements. First, the agreement protected Trump, his sons, and the Trump family business from IRS audits involving previous tax returns. Second, it proposed $1.8 billion to compensate people claiming they had been mistreated by the government. Potential beneficiaries reportedly included Trump allies and people prosecuted after January 6th. Blanche was behind the whole thing. So yes, he has to be held responsible. That alone should have disqualified him from becoming Attorney General. But those are not the times that we live in. And that's just not the orientation of our current governmental structure. President Trump being in power, Republicans holding Senate and the House. A federal judge described the arrangement as potential self-dealing as potential self-dealing and specifically questioned Blanche signing it after previously representing Trump. Remember, he is Trump's former personal defense attorney. Blanche initially resisted providing senators with a written guarantee that the fund was dead. His nomination stalled until he agreed in writing to terminate the payments and narrow the tax protections. There are additional concerns. Under Blanche, the Justice Department pursued investigations involving people Trump regarded as enemies, including former administration officials and sitting senators. Federal judges criticized some results in cases as weak, and grand juries declined to return indictments in certain instances. He's been going after all of Trump's enemies. You don't think these guys are going to be talking? They're going to be talking probably every single day on the phone. Blanche also participated in the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files, which drew objections over incomplete releases, improper redactions, exposure of survivor information, and the department's refusal to provide straightforward answers. And when Blanche appeared before Congress, he frequently sounds less like an independent law enforcement officer and more like Trump's defense attorney. Yeah, he's one of those. He avoids direct answers, argues with lawmakers, repeatedly frames scrutiny of Trump as political persecution. Is Todd Blanche legally qualified? I guess. He does have extensive defense experience and prosecutorial experience. Do we trust him to investigate Trump independently? No. Based on his conduct? Absolutely not. Is he behaving as the president's personal lawyer right now, except in an official Senate-confirmed position as Attorney General? It seems like it. His qualifications are besides the point, in my opinion. I mean, that enough is a conflict of interest, him being his personal attorney. All right, next topic. And Trump won't stop. Trump issues new birthright citizenship orders after Supreme Court ruling. He is relentless. He does not want babies that are born on this land to be considered citizens. Bullshit. Just bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. Where are you from if you are not born on that land? Where are you from? I mean, if I was born in China and the day after my mom flew me to the United States and then I grew up in the United States, I think I would say I'm Chinese American or I'm Chinese and American. I don't know what I would say. I think I'm both at that point. But the land matters. It just matters. Like, it doesn't matter what Trump says here. I don't give a shit what you say about the law. We got to be logical first, right? We got to think with our heads, because no matter what Trump wants or Democrats or this or that, that's all bias. It's open for interpretation. Your opinion is just as important as the president's. That's why we talk about things like this. If someone is born on a piece of land, how would they not be from there? So Trump wants to run around creating laws, challenging it in the Supreme Court. They were born on that land. It's undeniable. So here's our question. Should a president continue challenging birthright citizenship after the Supreme Court has reaffirmed it? Guess what? You lost, buddy. It doesn't make sense. You think the Supreme Court is stupid? I thought they were supposed to be independent and nonpartisan. Yet Trump criticizes them at every turn. What do you want here, President Trump? Do you want it your way or the highway? I mean, that's kind of how he wants it, right? He either gets his way or everybody else is wrong. And he will not stop pursuing this. On June 30th, the Supreme Court ruled that citizenship extends to children born in the United States whose parents do not fall within narrow, historically recognized exceptions. That's all we needed to hear from the Supreme Court. And here's a round of applause that the Supreme Court actually did the right thing. It's undeniable. It is undeniable. Let me make a point here. If I'm born in Russia and the day after my parents take me to the United States and I live in the United States for the next 40 years, I never leave the country, let's say. Who gives a shit? If I said I was American, I don't think anyone would disagree. But do I have a stake to a claim to say that I'm Russian? Absolutely. I was born in Russia. Now, of course, this is an edge case, right? This is an aberration. It's not your everyday situation, but we're going to be extreme here. Do I have a right to say that I am Russian? Yes. In my opinion, yes. I mean, think about the question first, right? It's not my opinion over yours, but I was born there. I was born on the land. Again, in my opinion, that is undeniable. You can't take that away from me. I was born on the land, whether my parents are citizens or not. Now, of course, and we've reported on this, the United States is actually the odd ones out. If you look at the map for birthright citizenship, we're one of the few countries that offers it. You see this right here? Anything that's blue, that's rule of the land. If you are born in blue nations, you are automatically offered citizenship, irrespective of your parents' nationalities. If you look at the countries in the red, that's rule of the blood. It's essentially split between Eastern and Western hemispheres. If you're born in the red, your citizenship depends on the citizenship of your parents. I can't agree with that. I just can't. Half the world follows rule of the blood. But again, I'm a citizen of what land? Like, where am I from? I was born there. You got to say that I'm from there, right? Or now, are we talking about assimilation and cultural norms being adopted? I mean, what are we talking about here? You can raise those issues for debate. Of course you can. But could you say that I wasn't Russian if I was born in Russia and then after a day I was taken to the United States? I'm still Russian, right? I'm born on the land. You're only born once. I think the land in which you're born matters. And I don't even care about this map. I don't care about rule of the land or rule of the blood. But Trump is relentless. He does not want babies born here that do not have citizens as parents. He does not want them to be allowed to be citizens of the United States. Now let's hear some of Trump.
So we're cracking down very big crackdowns, and this will give us the right to do it in a much more forceful manner. But they've taken birthright citizenship and they've made a joke out of it. And we're actually the only country of size, I think just about the only country, period, that does birthright citizenship. I thought we were going to win it at the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, we had a bad decision, very unfair decision. Our country suffers because of it, and we're ending it a different way.
This has been something that people talked about not only for years, but for decades. The idea that people come here pretending to be a tourist, pretending to be a visitor, saying they want to go to Disneyland, they want to go visit a monument or go to a national park. But the real reason they're here is to have a child, to make that child an automatic citizen, leave our country, and then have a U.S. citizen child. It gives them access under this broken system to welfare benefits, ultimately to the voting booth, and all the other rights and privileges that belong solely to Americans. So that practice of birth tourism is, as of the signing of this order, hereby banned. And what that means is that no one in the world is any more allowed to obtain a visa for this fraudulent purpose.
It's a fair point because I can somewhat agree.
And they went.
I can somewhat agree to that. I mean, there are estimates that, let's say 20,000 babies a year are born through birth tourism in the United States. 20,000. And that represents less than 0.7% of all US births. I mean, what are we talking about here? And by the way, we're not even having babies in this country. We should be promoting births here. But I do agree. He raises a good point, right? President Trump does raise a good point because you do get access to all of our systems. You get access to welfare, healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, right? So yes, ultimately, it would be our tax dollars paying for it. However, if a baby is born here, forget about the laws, y'all. Forget about them. I'm asking you as a human. I'm not even asking you to be compassionate or anything. I'm just asking you, like, what makes sense to you? Hey, a baby was born here. Is that baby American? Forget about the law. Is the baby American? I think so. Yeah, baby was born here, right? I don't give a shit what this map says. This is the rest of the world. This is the United States. This is the rest of the world. We live in the US. And I'm asking you from your perspective, if the baby is born here, are they American or not? Forget about what President Trump or anyone has to say. Stephen Miller, this guy's fucking crazy. Forget about all that. What do you think it should be? I agree. I don't want people taking advantage of our system either. I think that's unfair. And it creates gross inefficiencies in our economy and the global economy at that. I can agree with that. But again, what makes sense here? So, June 30th, the Supreme Court ruled that citizenship extends to children born in the United States, no matter where their parents fall, citizens or not. Approximately 5 weeks later, Trump signed 2 more executive orders attempting to restrict birthright citizenship and birth tourism. The 14th Amendment states that all people born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction are citizens. You can't get around that. But he's going to try, because his entire presidency, this second time around, has been about bending and breaking the rules, testing his limits. Now, that language has historically meant that if you are born here, you are an American citizen. It's undeniable, regardless of whether your parents are citizens, permanent residents, temporary visitors, or undocumented immigrants. The traditional exceptions involve children of foreign diplomats, children born to hostile forces occupying American territory, and certain historical circumstances involving tribal sovereignty that Congress later addressed. That's all nonsense. Those are all aberrations. Trump's new order attempts to expand those exceptions by arguing that additional children should not qualify for automatic citizenship. A second order directs the secretaries of state and Homeland Security to prevent birth tourism for nationals entering the country primarily to give birth so their child receives American citizenship. To me, I'm a little flattered. Got to be honest. Oh, you want to be American? You want to live here? I mean, does that make you feel like superior to the person or something? Like, to me, people that want to come to the United States, it's like, yeah, come on over, man. 99% of people are good. 99% of people are going to do the right thing. Every time we're sitting over here and saying, look at the immigrants, look at what they're doing. I mean, I agree at the end of the day, people have to come in legally. It's the rules. I can't disagree with those rules. I just can't. And you're talking to someone that doesn't even believe that we should have lines in this world. But again, I got to agree with those rules. We all have them. Okay? If I go to another country right now and I overstay my visa, they're either arresting my ass or they're making me pay fines and then they're going to expel me. That's just the way it works. Do I agree with it? No, but that's the way it works. Now, I understand the objection to birth tourism. American citizenship should not be packaged and advertised by foreign travel agencies as part of an expensive maternity vacation. And again, ultimately, we're going to probably pay for your birth over here. You're not going to be on the hook for it. And then you're going to get all of the benefits because the child is now American. But again, I'm asking you, let's use our thinking caps here. Seriously, I'm just asking you casually. Like on the street, if I'm like, hey, how you doing? You know, we're just having a casual conversation. If a child's born here, are they American? That's all you need to know. That's it. The rhetorical answer here is yes, they are American. But there is a direct way to address that. Deny visas when applicants misrepresent their intentions, prosecute organized immigration fraud, investigate the businesses arranging fraudulent applications. But that still does not answer why the newborn child should be denied citizenship. The child did not complete the visa application. The child did not misrepresent the purpose of the trip. The child was born inside the United States. And once we begin conditioning citizenship on a parent's immigration status, how would that operate? Would hospitals have to determine whether a mother is undocumented, whether she's visiting temporarily, seeking asylum, or waiting for a visa extension? What are we going to put these mothers through? Would babies then remain without citizenship while the government litigates their parents' status? I mean, what are we going to be doing to families here? We're going to be putting them on the hook for thousands of dollars through court litigation? Would states issue different birth certificates depending on which federal category applies? I mean, come on, y'all. What do you want, conditional birth certificates? Trump fundamentally does not want every child born here to become a citizen. He believes citizenship should depend partly on the parent's legal connection to the United States. I just can't agree with it. Because someone born here, I believe, is American. The latter part of that statement, him believing that citizenship should be tied to the connection of the parent, I could kind of agree with that. Half the world does it. But if I gotta pick one or the other, the child was born on that land. Therefore, they are a citizen. So I cannot agree with him. This is a legitimate political position for him to advocate. But an executive order is not the proper instrument for rewriting the 14th Amendment. This should go through the Senate. That's who represents us, right? Let the people speak for this. Let us have a fucking referendum. He is challenging a super important legal precedent. Again, we're not even having babies in this country. He's already asked the Supreme Court to reconsider prior interpretations. And they said nay. When will he stop? This is just too important to him. And now, hear what he has to say here.
Because of it. And it was decision, very unfair decision. Our country suffers because of it, and we're ending it a different way.
Mr. President, at the Supreme Court, John Sauer, the Solicitor General, did not have an answer as to how many individuals take advantage of birth tourism. Is there a number that you can
I'll tell you right now, hundreds of thousands, okay? Hundreds of thousands. You have one man came in with a family, said he had 56 children. Another one came in, they said they had 98 children. This was not what it was for. This was meant for the babies of slaves. It was right after 1 week or 2 weeks after the Civil War ended. This wasn't for wealthy multi-millionaires, billionaires coming in and
Yeah, it was meant for the babies of slaves, the slaves that didn't come from here, right? The slaves that were shipped from Africa. However, he's talking about some aberrations here. One man came and had 56 kids. Come on now. Another man came, had 98 kids. Did you hear what he just said? Come on now. He will say anything to try to defend his point. It's not even good debate. And you're talking about the country's future here. You got to ask what Americans want. You really want to know, if you really want to know what Americans think, we should have a poll, a real poll. Anyway, again, let's have a referendum. Put it on the ballot this November. And let's vote. Should we challenge birthright citizenship? You have to ask the question the right way. Should an American that is born on U.S. soil, irrespective of their parents' immigration status, be considered a citizen of the United States? That's the question we should answer. I would think the majority of us are going to say, yes, that child is American. If Trump wants to eliminate universal birthright citizenship, do it the right way. Propose a constitutional amendment. That would require 2/3 of both houses of Congress and ratification by 3/4 of the states. Now, this is intentionally difficult because citizenship should not change every 4 years depending on who occupies the White House. I don't want a Democrat to come in office just to reverse course what the Republican just did. I mean, seriously, what are we doing here? This is when our political system becomes a circus. You are born here, you are an American. Unless the Constitution itself is amended, that should not become more complicated because a president refuses to accept the answer. You challenged it with the Supreme Court. They turned you down. That should be the end of it. You're signing 2 more executive orders to circumvent a Supreme Court order? President Trump, you're out of bounds. All right, next topic. Ow! Oh! All right. Airlines are using AI to set pricing, but who actually benefits? Who benefits when airlines use AI to set ticket prices? Is it the travelers or the airlines? Because this is already happening. Delta and Virgin Atlantic are among the airlines working with Fetcher, an AI company that builds pricing and revenue management technology for airlines. Now, airlines historically have dynamically priced tickets for 20 years. A flight that's filling up quickly gets more expensive. A flight with a bunch of empty seats may get cheaper. That's not new. What's changing is the speed and sophistication. Instead of relying as heavily on predetermined fare buckets, rules and analysts responding to changing conditions, AI can analyze demand, forecast where it's going, and recommend pricing changes much faster. So imagine Delta has a 6 p.m. flight to New York, from New York to Miami. Bookings suddenly accelerate. The AI recognizes that demand is running ahead of expectations and determines Delta probably doesn't need to sell the remaining seats for $250 anymore. Maybe the optimal price is $290. That increase can happen much faster now, but it can work in the opposite. But it can work in the opposite direction too. Suppose tomorrow's flight isn't selling. The airplane is flying whether those seats are occupied or not. And an empty seat produces essentially zero ticket revenue once that plane takes off. So AI can recognize weak demand sooner and recommend dropping the fare to stimulate bookings. So technically, what Fetcher is proposing is that AI doesn't inherently mean higher prices, it means more efficient prices. Sometimes that could mean cheaper tickets, but here's my question. What is the AI actually being optimized to accomplish? The airline isn't buying this technology because its objective is to save me money. It's buying it because it wants to improve revenue and profitability. So if I'm a Delta shareholder, I'm going to love this. If technology is allowing Delta to figure out that I was willing to pay $320 for a seat that it otherwise would have sold me for $280, that's $40 of additional revenue without adding another airplane. You do that across millions of passengers, and you're talking about meaningful revenue optimization. But as a passenger, my reaction is completely different. Because historically, there have been inefficiencies in airline pricing. Sometimes you find a ridiculously cheap flight because the airline hadn't fully responded to demand yet. Sometimes prices remained low longer than they probably should have. Does AI eventually eliminate more of those opportunities for consumers? The answer here is yes. And there's another important distinction. This isn't supposed to be personalized pricing based on who you are. Delta says it doesn't use personal information to set individualized fares and doesn't share personal customer information with Fetcher. The system instead looks at things like aggregated purchasing information, route demand, and changing market conditions. And that's a huge distinction because there's a difference between demand for this flight is exploding, raise the price, and this particular customer appears desperate to get to Miami tomorrow, charge him more. The first is sophisticated dynamic pricing. The second starts to look a lot more like surveillance pricing. Yeah. Predatorial. No. If they know that I'm constantly searching for this flight and I kind of have no other choice, they're going to charge me more. So again, we're moving from dynamically set prices to now embedding AI. It's going to eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies as far as maybe you see arbitrage from one site to another. And maybe it just sees enough traffic that it says, yeah, this is just too much demand. We're going to raise prices. And how quickly AI can apply these prices? In a second. So the primary beneficiary here is the airline. That's the entire reason they're investing in this technology. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. Now, consumers could benefit when AI recognizes oversupply faster and discounts seats because the airline needed to stimulate demand. But over millions of transactions, the objective isn't to systematically leave more money in the passenger's pocket. It's to get closer to the optimal price for every seat on every flight. So just like Uber charges more when fares are in demand, let's say it's raining outside, it's the same type of idea. So now we have to ask, if every major airline eventually gets extremely good at this, the optimal price, do pricing inefficiencies that occasionally gave us great deals start disappearing? Probably. AI isn't making prices more expensive. It's just making airlines more efficient and much better at figuring out when they don't need to make them cheaper, meaning that prices in all likelihood will remain elevated because they've become so much more optimized. And this is bad news for the consumer. It just means things will get more expensive. So this is just one of those cases where, yes, we've introduced AI, but it's not necessarily good for us. And yes, it's predatory because they clearly see us searching for what flights. They see who's hitting the site enough times. They see that seats are filling up. It's no longer that they dynamically set those prices every hour or two. They're literally doing it by the second with AI. All right, next topic. Okay, we have to pay attention to this. And everyone's talking about it, right? Are we in an AI bubble or not? And if we are, when is it going to pop? Is this real? Is the spend justified? When are we going to see a return on our investment? Once we see economies of scale, do we see prices come down because of token optimization? Once technology becomes cheaper, once LLMs become commoditized, do we see them become subsidized? These are all legitimate questions. Because AI can be revolutionary, like electricity was, or the internet. But as far as the stock market is concerned, this could still be one of the biggest investment bubbles we've ever seen. Now, that's the warning coming from tech critic Ed Zitron, and we're going to hear him in just a moment. And whether you agree with him or not, I think investors need to hear the argument. You got to hear both sides, right? You can't just always hear the sweet side of the argument. That's why I love listening to Jamie Dimon. And Zitron isn't really arguing that AI doesn't work. It definitely works, right? That should be obvious to everyone. All the companies use it. People code with it, research with it. It's ubiquitous at this point, and it's undeniable. His argument is about the economics underneath all of this. We're building an absolutely enormous amount of infrastructure based on the assumption that demand for AI and the revenue generated from AI is eventually going to justify all of this spending. And Zitron's question is basically, where is the money going to come from? His research argues that OpenAI and Anthropic represent roughly 89% of AI startup revenue, meaning this supposedly enormous industry is still remarkably concentrated. And then there's the independent evidence of that concentration. Menlo Ventures estimates companies spent about $37 billion on generative AI in 2025, more than triple the previous year. That's real growth. But at the foundation model level, Anthropic had about 40% of enterprise spending, OpenAI 27%, and Google 21%. Those three companies alone represented about 88% of enterprise LLM spending. So this isn't an argument that nobody is buying AI. They absolutely are. The question is whether they're buying enough AI to justify the infrastructure being built around it. Because data centers are not cheap. It takes about $50 billion just to stand one up. You're talking about chips, electricity, cooling systems, networking equipment, land, transmission infrastructure, and facilities that can take years to build. Zitron argues the industry's current compute commitments could eventually require trillions of dollars in annual AI revenue to economically justify the build-out. And then there's another part of the argument that I find interesting. What if AI becomes dramatically more efficient? Because that's normally considered great news. Better models, fewer tokens, better chips, smaller models, lower inference costs. But if we've already invested enormous amounts of money, and we're talking about trillions of dollars, assuming AI will require exponentially more compute every year, what happens if technological advancement means we actually need less compute per unit of useful work? That's where DeepSeek comes in. That's a new LLM that was introduced about a year ago in China. Everyone is describing this as an arms race with them. We have to spend, we have to build data centers, we have to buy GPUs. We can't let China win. But the Chinese developers already demonstrated that capability. They're already building data centers. They're planning ones in space. And then they already introduced DeepSeek. What did the market do? How did the market react? Nothing. They just kept buying because the idea is we can't let China win. Now let's hear from him.
Curious why you think that is. So I'm not sure it is anti-AI, don't get me wrong, but I think it's also anti-financial shenanigans. I think everyone sees the circular financing. I think they see that Microsoft, Google, and Amazon gets basically all of their AI revenues, either through products they're pushing on their customers or indeed compute spend from Anthropic and OpenAI.
And what he's talking about with the circular financing is that NVIDIA would invest in Google and then Google would buy back from NVIDIA, right? So the circular financing, right? And you saw this with the dot-com bubble back in 2000, 2001. And again, if you have circular financing and you have enough of that, you have enough of these Venn diagrams, enough of this overlap, it'll essentially create a bubble.
And the average person's existence right now is so expensive, so hard, so difficult. Getting a mortgage as a regular person is so difficult. But if you're standing up a theoretical data center in 36 months full of NVIDIA GPUs, the banks fall over themselves to give you the money. CoreWeave just raised, what, a 9% bond? I mean, you can raise anything if you have a data center. And I think regular people can see that AI does not deliver what people promise. They can see the opulence of the people at the top of the AI industry. They can also see that they're being lied to and being deliberately scared on top of all of this egregious circular financing.
So you think people are actually lying? Like, or do you think people
specifically?
I don't know. Like, is it the companies at the hyperscalers, the CEOs, the bankers? Like, do you think, you know, and to be fair, we really should reach out to everybody. But I mean, is that what you're saying? That, or do they not really know?
I think they're overstating things.
Okay.
I think lying would suggest a certain malice, what have you.
Yeah.
I don't accuse anyone of, but I believe that they are massively overstating what AI will do. You'll notice that AI people tend to speak in the future tense. They tend not to say, oh, well, today it can. It's always AI will, AI will. Oh, we're going to get the singularity. Oh, AI will do this and that. That's because when they talk about what's happening today, it's pretty mediocre outside of code. And on top of that, these things are horribly unsustainable and unprofitable. And on top of that, they've got these destructive data centers, these massive eyesores that poison black communities, these massive eyesores that need billions of dollars at a time when it's hard for a regular person to get a dime from the banks. So yeah, I think that there is beyond just the misleading, this general sense of unfairness that AI taps into. And on top of that, if this all goes pear-shaped, these people are going to realize that there was an authority crisis happening, that so many people got beguiled by hyperscaler promises. What it ultimately is, and I'm quoting Ed Elson of Prof G Markets here, our media, I believe, has a cult-like worship of the wealthy, that they believe that whatever the wealthy says will come true. And in the past with the tech industry, that's kind of come true.
I love what he just said there. We have a cult-like worship of the rich, that whatever the rich say will come true. And at every churn, CEOs will say, oh yeah, AI will fix that. Again, let's go back to what Elon Musk said. By 2035, nobody will need any jobs. By 2035, money will be meaningless. I mean, come on. Like, you know, it's one thing to say, to just dismiss him, but a lot of people believe him. A lot of people believe him. His companies have cult-like followings. They only invest in him. They only invest in those companies because they're investing in Elon Musk. Elon Musk leaves those companies. I'm not going to say that the stocks will go to shit, but in all likelihood, they'll probably lose a tremendous amount of value. The Elon Musk aspect no longer is in the thesis. Once you take that out, I think those stocks would probably lose at least 20% of their value almost immediately. So are we going to keep accepting the idea that AI will excuse us from the inevitability of, I don't know, a downtrend? Historically, if you look back at human history, we always overbuild. Every single time we get a new toy, we get new technology, we overbuild. How many websites? They bought literally every single domain in the dot-com era. There were stocks being issued left and right for companies, these startups that we never even heard of. And then we had a dot-com bubble. What happens when we started realizing that mortgages were extremely lucrative? We started packaging mortgage-backed securities in 2007, 2008, when the economy was already at all-time highs, only to see a recession precipitate. We always will overbuild. Back in the 90s, we overbuilt with fiber, right? Once we got fiber technology, we built thousands of lines of fiber. A lot of that is still unused today. So it's inherent in human nature to want to overbuild, to want to invest in the new technology. However, ChatGPT got introduced in 2022. It's 2026. I ask you, the audience, do you think LLMs are commoditized? Hell yeah. I would have answered that question in 2024. I would have said yes. That's why we had such a DeepSeek scare, because we keep saying, oh, once these become commoditized, we're going to have trouble. Have we not already crossed that line? And I think one of the most important things that he's saying here is, where's the money going to come from? He's saying that we need to generate trillions of dollars of revenue. Now, I'll throw up a graphic for you. We're generating about $25 trillion in total revenue across corporate America. At some point, I think today we're probably going to say that AI is embedded in every single company, right? Because everyone is using AI to a certain extent. But the top companies, the Mag 7, they're generating about $1.5 trillion in revenue, but they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars in CapEx to build out these data centers. Will we need them? There's just so many questions, right? And then on top of that, are AI data centers even sustainable? I'm investing in the AI thesis personally. So I'm buying companies like GE Vernova or Vertiv. However, it's just hard to say, because everyone's been looking for a return on investment, right? Everyone's been saying like, all right, since AI got introduced in 2022, if you follow the markets, if you follow market commentary, they have been asking to justify the spend since 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026. They are saying the exact same thing. They've been saying the exact same thing for 4 straight years. So when is the ROI going to be seen? I think it's in our bottom lines. It's in the bottom lines of all of these corporations, because again, everyone is using AI, right? I work my current job. I use AI every single day. I think most people do. So maybe it doesn't necessarily show up in the numbers, but are companies going to become more profitable? Yes. Yes, because we're going to be more productive. Yes, because we're hiring less people. Less headcount means more revenue per employee, meaning that we're being more efficient because our operating income is going higher. Our operating margins are going higher. So again, AI is going to find its way into everyone's income statement. But the question of, can we generate enough revenue to justify this level of spend, considering that everything is going to become more efficient, everything's going to become commoditized if it already isn't, maybe we're already running ahead of ourselves.
Except it stopped really coming true about 10, 11 years ago, and we exited the era of hypergrowth. And that's all AI is. AI is an attempt to restart hypergrowth for hyperscalers who don't have a new Google search, who don't have a new iPhone, and certainly do not have a next Amazon Web Services.
You know, the narrative and the conversation though around AI, I mean, we've been covering it from day one. I can remember, the Microsoft and OpenAI investment, our world changed in terms of every conversation that we've been having. But as of late, easily the last 6 months, maybe longer, this idea of return on investment, which wasn't there initially. If the companies weren't, their CapEx wasn't growing, they weren't spending, every company wasn't talking AI, you got punished. Now it's getting a little bit more discriminating, if you will, or specific in terms of looking at cases and what are we getting at. We had investment advisors earlier, and she said the same thing. Like, companies are starting to look at what is the cost of tokens? What does it cost to have all these models for our employees? What are you using it for? Really? Just do that on your own. So the conversation narrative is changing. Don't you think it will continue to change, and it might be uncomfortable in terms of how it plays out in financial markets?
I think
Because as the reality comes, in your view?
Yes, I think this conversation is only going to accelerate. OpenAI didn't cut prices because they found some mystical way of making things cheaper. They make something 80% cheaper. They saw the danger from China and they saw the competition from Anthropic, and they said, well, we're allowed to burn billions of dollars, so why don't we just cut prices and then make it up in volume for an unprofitable product? I think the ROI conversation is only going to accelerate too, because we should have really had it years ago. We really should have had it immediately. But again, people believe everything the tech industry says, and they just thought, well, they wouldn't say this and be wrong, would they?
Where, in your view, does Elon Musk and SpaceX fit into this conversation? I bring it up because we learned this afternoon that Elon Musk's net worth has fallen to $684 billion, which, yes, is a lot of money. It has erased, though, the IPO gains from SpaceX. And we haven't been with you.
Still the world's richest. You got a rich guy on the Bloomberg.
Okay. You haven't joined us since SpaceX IPO'd, but there's a data point there for, at least in the short term, reception to a public company that has pretty significant exposure with AI.
Well, I think SpaceX is kind of the proof point you need. We have someone who can sink unlimited capital into this, who can hire anyone, who can theoretically stand up as much capacity as possible, breaking multiple laws at the same time, not getting the permits. And what did we get for it? We got Grok. And what is Grok? Well, it's a third, fourth, fifth tier LLM that really only some people use by accident when they turn on Twitter. So we have this thing where we've had our third Anthropic and OpenAI. We've seen someone else try it. We've had what should be the proof point that AI is an industry, that we can have many AI labs and, 1,000 flowers will bloom. And what we have is manure. We have a company that loses billions of dollars to do what? I don't know.
So should the US be in an arms race with China for AI?
No, I think that the arms race with China in and of itself is a marketing ploy. Well, oh no, what's China going to do? Make a cheaper and better LLM? Uh-oh, it already happened. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. China
What about the security?
And again, what he's mentioning there is DeepSeek. So he's calling the race with China a marketing ploy, saying we got to have this arms race with China, just like we had the space race with Russia, because we can't be last to it. It's such a compelling argument because DeepSeek already came out. They've already introduced open source, more efficient models with less compute, less sophisticated GPUs. And how did the market react? You know what the market did? We're at all-time highs. DeepSeek was introduced, what, in 2023? I mean, come on, y'all. Like, something's a little fishy over here. That's what I'm saying. We got to hear the argument, right? So again, what did he just say about Grok? I mean, he just took a shit on Elon Musk and SpaceX, but he was dismissive of Grok. His basic argument is that Grok isn't some revolutionary fourth platform. It's just another LLM with distribution through X. You can disagree with him about Grok specifically, but the broader question remains. If 5 different models can write an email, summarize a PDF, how much pricing power does any individual model ultimately have? One of the hosts said, hey, I was using OpenAI. I actually ran out of my searches for the day, so I just switched over to Gemini. There are no switching costs. So what moat do you have? There is no moat. There is no competitive advantage at this point because I think we have our answer. They have been commoditized. And that's why I think we have to separate AI, the technology, from AI, the investment narrative. The internet was real. Amazon was real. Google search was real. Cloud computing was real. And the dot-com bubble was also real. Those statements don't contradict each other. In fact, that's usually what makes technological bubbles so convincing. There's something genuinely revolutionary underneath them. And there's a legitimate counter-argument to Zitron. Enterprise AI spending isn't shrinking. Menlo estimates it went from about $1.7 billion in 2023 to $37 billion in 2025. OpenAI says enterprise customers now account for more than 40% of its revenue. So demand is clearly there. It's real. The disagreement is about how big it ultimately becomes and whether that growth happens fast enough to produce acceptable returns on the staggering amount of capital being deployed today. If you listen to Wall Street commentary, I don't think anybody will deny that we're in a bubble. It's just when and if the bubble will pop. Could this spend be justified? Here's the thing. It's all about timing in the market, right? Let's say this spend gets justified in 20 years from now. Is your portfolio going to be able to withstand the drawdown? Because if the spend gets justified 20 years from now, that's a huge period of time. The market's probably going to punish and the bubble is probably going to pop way before then. So if you're trading on margin, if you're highly levered, you probably can't wait that long a period. And that's why Jamie Dimon's position is interesting, because he's actually giving you almost the opposite argument. Dimon recently said the AI infrastructure boom will ultimately pay off and argued that the technology is powerful enough to justify enormous investment. Earlier this year, he literally said the technology was powerful enough to be worth the $1 trillion build-out. But Dimon has simultaneously warned about exuberance, valuations, and leverage in financial markets. And I actually think those two positions can coexist. AI could transform the world, and investors could still be paying too much for that transformation today.
Security risks that these LLMs or some of these agents are exposing, those from OpenAI and those from Anthropic?
Well, I think the biggest risk with OpenAI and Anthropic's agents is they don't appear to do basic security practices. They don't appear to take care of how they're using their systems. OpenAI say, I actually question this entire story, that their agent ran autonomously for multiple days, burning what sounds like unlimited compute. Either this company is run so terribly that they were running up millions of dollars of bills to randomly do stuff, and also they don't watch what it's doing. Software does what it's told to do. We don't know the prompt, we don't know the training, and they're not releasing the model.
But it doesn't change the fact that these agents reportedly found weaknesses in code that, if not exposed, or that could be vulnerable. Like what I'm saying is, if this there's an idea that if this gets into the wrong hands, then systems could break down. Just very briefly.
One thing, it's already in the wrong hands. OpenAI and Anthropic, they've shown they do not have the responsibility to make security tools. They should not be making them. They don't know what they're doing. It's blatantly obvious. And on top of it, it's they brute force the hacking agent. They shoved as much compute power into it as possible. You can also pay hackers to do that. It's illegal. Also, this all sounds illegal. I'm no lawyer. I'm no judge, but I don't know why they're allowed to do this. Yeah, these things are dangerous if they're allowed to be trained on cybersecurity measures and execute against them. I find the whole thing repugnant because everyone is saying, "Oh, look at the scary LM," versus looking at the companies that run it.
We got to run 20 seconds.
I love his critique on OpenAI, Anthropic, the whole AI investment thesis. Again, this is why we have to hear it out, right? You got to hear both sides of the argument. Yes, AI is going to explode, but AI could essentially just be a bubble that pops and we lose all of our money, right? And there's been many articles that have been written about it, and you do have both sides of the argument, but you got to hear them, right? You got to digest them. We've been hearing in the last few weeks that AI agents have been going rogue and breaking out of their environments and hacking other companies. When we first heard it, it was from OpenAI. Anthropic followed about a week later. Now we have Meta doing it. And I think there was a fourth company that did it. Now it's becoming the norm. When we first heard this news, forget about the market reaction. The market didn't really react. But when we first heard this news, people were saying, oh shit, Terminator, the robots are coming, right? Because the way I interpreted it was, hey, if these agents are actually rogue, they actually did exactly what they were designed to do. They were supposed to break out of the environment and essentially expose security vulnerabilities. So they did what they were supposed to do. However, they just weren't controlled, and there were mistakes made by some of the engineers in each one of these companies. They've already admitted to it. However, the idea that they were hacking these other companies when they kind of weren't supposed to, right? They actually were supposed to, but they kind of weren't supposed to, was scary, right? Because the way I interpreted it was, hey, if this was in a robot, the robot goes rogue and does something outside of its protocols that were established, that could be dangerous for humans, right? That's the Terminator theory, right? Skynet. Now, and this is just like 3 weeks, a 3-week span. Do you know what we're saying now? We're saying, oh, no. If these AI agents are actually hacking other systems, that means they have really strong and powerful and intelligent AI. You see how the narrative has changed? I mean, it's super intense and it's just super insane. Because now it's like we're applauding OpenAI and applauding Anthropic, applauding Meta. We're like, oh no, they have really sophisticated AI models. That's why they hacked the other companies to begin with. I mean, it's just a clusterfuck at this point. The other point that he just made was that they were spending an enormous amount of computing power to conduct these tests, which he estimates are millions of dollars on a single test. So his underlying point here is, how on earth could they be efficient? They're actually being extremely irresponsible because this takes an enormous amount of compute, which takes an enormous amount of our resources in the form of water, compute, and electricity, which raises the costs for us, by the way. So that's what he's inherently saying.
Anything that would change your mind and make you say, this is real quickly?
Not really.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of
I mean, again, he is just an awesome critic. I wanted to hear him out, and we did, right? So is there an AI bubble? Nobody knows. What return are we actually getting for every additional dollar we're putting into AI? I mean, we just haven't seen the return yet. We have productivity gains, but nobody's been able to quantify it. And we're hearing all of these earnings calls, and it's like, again, we like to listen to the rich. We think that the rich are always right because they have all of the money, they have all of the power and the influence. What he's saying is, no, we actually have to discount all of that, because they're always going to say whatever is self-perpetuating, right? They want us to keep investing. They want us to be off to the races. Nobody wants to kind of hear that negative commentary. Nobody wants to hear any pessimism when it comes to AI or any other thesis. Remember, we've seen this historically. Nobody wanted to hear it during the dot-com bubble, and we're seeing this repeat itself today. But at some point, we have to say, show me the revenue. Where are the margins? Where's the cash flow? Earnings are at all-time highs. We're crushing earnings today. So to say that AI has not had a dent or has not affected our operations here, at least across corporations in the S&P 500, I couldn't agree with that. AI has had a tremendous impact. However, he's saying, is all of the compute going to be justified? And everyone right now, if you're invested in these markets, you're investing in AI. So once that pullback happens, and it will, right? I'm going to just ask you, do you think we'll find ourselves in another recession in the future? The future being between now and 10 years from now? Yeah, history tells you we will have a 10 to 20% drawdown. It's just a matter of when. But we got to stop it. But what we have to stop with is, how impressive is the technology at this point? Because I think we've kind of reached critical mass already. The models are already commoditized. We have to stop listening to this argument about, America has to beat China, because China's already competing with us. We just don't know enough about China, but they've already demonstrated that they have the capability to do far more with less. Remember, they don't have access to the most sophisticated GPUs because of our trade embargoes. But we gotta see how these numbers justify the amount of capital we're putting into this. And we have been saying this. I know I might sound like every other pundit out there, but just realize we've been saying this for 4 years. Because if they don't, we're going to discover that AI was real. Nobody can doubt that at this point. The hype was real, but the price investors were willing to pay for it was the bubble. Thank you for watching. See you next time.